Hello and welcome to Tatwadeep Conversations and Explorations. For our fourth episode on language, we sat down with Professor Rajesh Kumar. Dr. Rajesh Kumar is a professor of linguistics in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Chennai. Prior to joining IIT Madras, he taught at IIT Kanpur and IIT Patna in India and at the University of Texas at Austin in the USA. His book on syntax of negation and licensing of negative polarity items was published by Routledge in 2006. The broad goal of his research is uncovering regularities underlying both the structural form, what language is, and the sociolinguistic functions, what language does, of natural language. In this interview, Professor Rajesh talks about language and the human mind, the multiplicity of mental processes and their impact on language evolution, language not just as a medium of communication, but also as a tool of assimilation of language in our lives. Why so many of us don't value this mysterious and underrated gift. What makes language one of the best medium to study the human mind. Why we need to look at language both within us and outside of us, among many other things. We hope this conversation can help the listeners see the tattva, the true essence of their own mother tongue, along with the values and meanings embedded within the structures of the different languages of our world and their strong interconnectedness. Good evening, Professor Rajesh. Thank you for giving your time to Tatwadeep. We are doing this topic, this exploration on languages after finishing a series on mathematics. We are very happy to have you here. We expect to learn things from you and understand your point of views on many things that involves languages and our life. Most people do not realize the importance, the critical role of language in our daily lives. So as a linguist, what can you tell us about language and its importance in our daily lives, not only for professors and writers and thinkers or philosophers, to the common man, how language helps us function, what is language, some basic ideas of language. You can introduce us to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for inviting me to this series and the opportunity to talk about what I understand about language and how I work with it and how language works. To begin contemplating on the questions that you asked, you see, I want to start with this very basic of humans, which is anything that is given to us in abundance or anything that is natural to us. We don't consciously value such things available to us in abundance. And due to time constraint, I don't want to take you through so many examples, but one can fill in the blanks. You can begin with what natural resources we have and how we treat natural resources. And all the way to the personal stuff, as general sayings go in many languages. If you want to understand importance of eyesight, you need to talk to someone who can see. Not to the people who can see. We take it so lightly. In fact, we at times don't take care of our eyes properly. We don't worry what goes in it, whether we need to wash it or not. And likewise, it goes to many things. Language is nature to us in that sense, and therefore it means that language is natural to us. And when I say people don't care about what is available or given to us in abundance, I don't mean to complain or lament on it. I'm only talking about that also is natural. It's not that we are consciously not taking care of something. It is natural. Being complacent about what's around us and longing for what's not around us is natural. So it's not a complaint about one versus many or one group to others, or even a specialist talking about anything in particular. I remember one sentence from a very famous sentence and very philosophically grounded sentence from a Hindi poet who says, I don't remember the full thing, but I remember only things that were relevant to me. Jo alabh jo dur usi ko adhik chahta mane. Meaning, what is not accessible, that is alabh, and dur, what is distant from us, we want only that. In other words, we don't value what is close to us, what is available to us. And that's very natural for everybody, for society, humans, and so on. So having said that much, language is indeed natural to us, and it is one of the things that defines humans. It's that close to us, to our existence, at all levels of our interactions with ourselves and our interactions with anything else is contingent upon language. When I say it defines our existence, I only mean in that sense. Now, what is it? A very common question that comes to classes, that comes to discussions, and comes to my mind as well. And I would at least honestly raise that question to you. Not sure how convincingly I answer that question, but at least it is important for people to see. The most commonly available definition of language, if you look around and if you talk to people, they will tell you language is a medium of communication. And there is nothing wrong about it. Language indeed is a medium of communication. We know there are when we go into the details of communications, we know there are theories, there are studies which says language, when you are looking at something or somebody, you only understand that thing or that person to the maximum possible extent of 25%, if you can quantify your understanding, through what the person speaks. Rest of the things about the situation or the person comes to you from variety of other things. That's the distinction between verbal and non-verbal communication researchers and linguists make. But that's about communication. So we come back to that again, and we move further from where I was saying language is indeed a medium of communication. There is no doubt about that. Moving beyond, the natural question arises from there. If it is the medium of communication and a very powerful medium of communication indeed, even though only 20% or 25% comes out of our understanding, shapes up through verbal medium, still a very powerful medium, then why do people speak so many different languages? Would it not be very normal for people all over the world, they just spoke one language? We can still be as different from others as we want to be and speak the same language so that communication becomes easier and we don't have to make any effort for talking to others. I don't have a very convincing answer to this question, and I confess it. However, adequate answer to this question or not. Either way, it tells you that language is way more than that. Language cannot be limited only to communication. I remember a very famous instance when Einstein was asked about his scientific achievements at some point. He probably in a different language told the person who asked him this question that if you look at scientific developments as ocean, I don't think I have stepped into it. I'm still at the source of this ocean. I don't know what lies within. I would not want to extrapolate that, but it comes very close to that. Whatever we know about our innate capability that we know as language, we know very little about it. And whatever we know, whatever little we know about it, it's just the beginning of it. To conclude on this part of this question, when it is way more than that, how can we rationalize or explain it for people to understand what we mean way more than that? You see, and here is what where we can at least begin. Despite several differences across languages, let me put it this way. As a linguist with responsibility, I can tell you, nobody across the world knows the total number of languages is spoken as we speak. We can only have an estimate about it. And again, I want to add a footnote to that. This is not a complaint against anybody. We have huge material available online in the modern time. As we started discussing, language is natural and commonly available entity to humans. You will not find anybody. If you ask a question about language to anybody that you come across, you won't find a single person who will tell you, I don't know anything about it. I can't tell you anything about it. People will have a position on language. People will have something to say about language. It's that common a thing. But we don't know the total number of languages spoken around the world or even within India. That is largely because, and that confirms our understanding that language is not a countable entity. We can look at names and therefore can say, we can talk about number of languages from its identity and names, but language indeed is not a countable entity because it is so flexible, so adaptable that it changes after every now and then. Whether you want to measure it in terms of time, language changes across the spectrum of time, has changed. We have historical evidence of that. If I give an example to people of English studies in my classes, that imagine a hypothetical situation where William Wordsworth or William Shakespeare could be resurrected, and they find people, they won't understand that these people are speaking English, because this is not the English that was spoken when Shakespeare lived or William Wordsworth lived. I'm talking about different centuries. So languages change across the spectrum of time, and language change across geography as well. And we can talk about those things in other details. So going back to connect from where I started, language is way more than just a medium, either for communication or for anything else. It defines our existence, but it is more than that. And despite of its natural variation across the world, there is a lot of similarity across languages. And that has compelled linguists, social scientists, and people from varied varied disciplines who look at language to understand that there is a mathematical pattern underlying language. This is how one needs to look at this enormous capacity, which, for the lack of words, at times people say God's gift. But this is human capacity. This is one capacity among many which defines humans. And also, allow me to add one more aspect of it. People have made efforts to study human mind. Human mind is one of the most complicated entity to study. Complicated, not in otherwise sense, only because it is a device which does multiple processing parallelly. We can't define the function of mind. You have no idea while speaking to you what else goes on in my mind, or I have no idea what's going on in your mind. You are thinking about various other things simultaneously that even you are not aware of. I'll elaborate on that part if you allow me a moment. You see, we talk. I use these examples, and therefore I am tempted to tell you. I use these examples for teaching. The people use yoga for concentration. What do we want to do through yoga? And without being condescending about it, when we try to concentrate, what we are trying to do in reality is we are trying to limit the capacity of mind. We are trying to focus on one thing where the natural tendency of human mind is not to focus on just one thing. Wandering about random things, its multiplicity and its capacity, is its nature. So through yoga or various other things, we are trying to focus on. That is trying to do something unnatural to its function. Now, how do we know about this? Through neuroscience and all other advancement in human history. The most powerful tool to look inside human mind comes through study of language. The design of machines in the modern time which can do parallel processing, and the ultimate goal of human scientific endeavor to come up with a machine which can function close to how human mind functions is the most desirable goals of 21st century scientific inventions. And any development that you see around us in terms of science is related to that. And thus, to study such a complex thing, such a complicated entity, the only medium is language, which can tell you way more than that, and I can elaborate on that. But the capacity of human mind and the connection, its connection with language, also tells us that language is one fraction part of human mind. Language is not all about human mind. I'm sorry, human mind is not all about language. Language is only one small part of it. That's how we need to look at language within and out of us.
Thank you, Professor. You covered a lot of ground. You spoke about teaching and language, spiritual practices and language, and many other things. One thing that we understand from your answer, and also through observation, we understand that language has both unlimited power and also limited. It's also limited at the same time. While it has unlimited power or power, it also has limitations. Now, is it right for us humans to expect language or give language the responsibility to run our affairs? Like, if we have a problem with someone, we have to sit down and talk to them. We don't have any other option. Or we write a letter to them using words and sentences. And then it goes up to the level of international relations. So language, as you, it has become a medium of communication. At the same time, language is just a small part of human mind. That's what you mentioned, you said. Now, as a linguist, as a person who's working with language on a day-to-day basis, how would you say the future of communication would change? And especially in the realm of relationships, both relationships inside the house or societies, and even international relationships. How would it change? And how would language... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I understand the question to its point, you see, you're talking about two specific aspects of language. One is, how is it, in what sense we say language is an unlimited, or in a sense limited capacity. And the other aspect that you are asking is related to its function, its use. So these things have been studied a lot in great details. That is, its form, that is formal aspects of language, and its function, which is known as functional aspects of language. When we look at form, we learn that language is truly it has no boundaries, and unlimited. It defines our capacity. It also defines what we mean when we say the capacity of human mind is unlimited. And if we talk about our imagination, you can expand and explore and explain your imagination only through language. But I am not using language as a medium for exploring what goes in mind. I'm going to give you an example of infinite capacity, infinite nature of language, how it functions within human mind. So please look at it. You see, we have capacity to understand sentences that we have never heard before. At the same time, we have capacity to speak sentences that we may not have ever spoken before. At the same time, so how does this capacity work? It is this capacity which explains why we never run out of sentences. We don't load ourselves with memory of sentences. We never ask questions to ourselves. How many sentences a day you speak? How many sentences a day you understand? Do we run out of our capacity of sentences? Answers to all these questions are obviously no. So our capacity to create, or the technical word that people use in this context is generate novel sentences, is unlimited. And this is what is called innate capacity of humans and human mind, which is connected to language. This capacity not only allows us to learn any number of languages until a particular age. So for example, take for example, if you expose a child to n number of languages before 8 years of age, and I'm taking the liberty taking these numbers of years, 8 or 7 or whatever I'm saying, there are reasons for that, which I can explain separately, but allow me to do that right now. So until 8 years of age, if you expose a child to, let's say, 20 different languages, the child will acquire all the 20 languages effortlessly. However, after 8 years of age, delete the chunk between 8 to 20 or 15. Why 20? 15. And make an effort to learn a language after 15. You will have to make efforts to learn the language. Before 15, I'm taking it this way. Before 10 and after 15. Before 10, you have to make no efforts. All you need to do is to live with the community where the language is spoken. You don't even need to keep your ear open. It is open all the time and it will go inside. All of us are examples of these things. We speak whatever we speak because we were exposed only to what we speak now. We don't speak something because we were not exposed to those languages at that point in time. So it's not the choice of the caregivers or the learner or the child herself to pick a language. We can't decide that I as a child or somebody as my child must learn French. That is not the decision we can take. Or why French? I can't learn Tamil if I am not living in Tamil speaking neighborhood. Now, I'm digressing a little bit, but I'm trying to tell you what is it that we mean by unlimited capacity? This is one aspect of that. We can learn infinite number of languages, mathematically speaking, given input within that period of time. Nothing restricts to us. This is a powerful assumption because it is probably unfalsifiable. You will never get an example of a person. You will never find one example of a person who has been exposed to all the possible languages. It's just not possible, humanly or otherwise. But if one is given this input, then one will acquire the language. Now, moving to the next stage, so human mind has generative capacity when it comes to language. And when a child is learning language or acquiring the language without being aware of the process of learning, what happens in human mind, and there is abundance of literature available on that. I am not telling you anything new about it. What happens in human mind is that generative capacity gets unfolded. And what is that capacity? That capacity in technical term is called computation, the ability to connect one constituent with the other one. So take the mathematical example. If you know addition, what number you put on the right side or left side is immaterial. What you need to know is the process of addition or subtraction or multiplication or division. The generative capacity of human mind works exactly that way. And this is the reason why we never run out of a sentence, or our capacity never gets tested whether we understand a given sentence in the language that we speak or not. So, and let me give you another example. And I use these examples in classes. If you ask any Tamil speaker, give her a sentence or a word and ask one question. Does this word belong to Tamil? It won't take even a fraction of a second for that person to tell you, as a speaker of Tamil, whether or not that word belongs to Tamil. Now, go back to computation and reflect back on that for a moment. Does this person know all the words of Tamil? The answer is definitely yes and no both. Because you give them if you give them a test, give them a paper or a thick notebook and ask them to start writing all the words he or she knows, you will stop after 50, 100. If you can stretch yourself after 200, you will be sweating. But If I give you one word, look at its computation and mathematics. What happens in human mind that it scans all possibilities in human mind and tells you, and rightly so, that no, this word doesn't belong to Tamil, or yes, this belongs to Tamil. This says about our capacity to understand language and its novelty. Any novel sentence, any permutation and combination of words in the form of a sentence is not really novel to us for our understanding, for making sense out of it. This is what, and a sentence in any language, this is something separate. I'll come back to that later if we have time, or we explore these things. A sentence can be infinitely long. We usually don't speak too long a sentence, but a sentence can technically be infinitely long, and that's another evidence of language being unlimited. Now, moving to the other aspect of what you asked about function in terms of words. So once this computation exists in human, as long as it is inside, it is called I language. That is language internal to human mind. The moment we start speaking, and for that at least we need two people to constitute society for language. As long as you have another person where you can speak, you are talking in society. The moment you start speaking, this becomes e-language because it's external language, external to us. And our mind knows very well about what to do with language and how to use the language in any given circumstances. And I'll give you one example of that as well, which will explain to you the diplomatic relations, the relations, interpersonal relations, formal relations, and everything in one go. You see, please notice a child who is 6-7 years old. In the process of development of this child as a human being, you will notice the child not only learns about the capacity of language, about its uses in society, but very strikingly, which we often not notice, the child also learns what is it that she is not supposed to be speaking. The child knows very well about things that she has never been taught. Nobody, you know, I mean, this becomes difficult to test in functional, in formal domains, but you can understand. There are words that we don't use in interpersonal communications, in personal, intimate, or formal relations. But children as early as 7-8 years of age figure it out that these are the things that I am not supposed to be talking about. How did this capacity develop? This capacity and development of this capacity, and to go a step beyond, our capacity to develop this ability tells you that we have capacity to use the language in any given circumstances. And if we do it otherwise, we do it in a very conscious effort. So how we consciously use to do what in a given relationship, given interpersonal domain of beginning from intimate to formal and to excessively formal or diplomatic situations, our mind knows very well. We only need to train ourselves to a limited extent in a particular domain to excel in that. And this is what language does and how we use language in the form of our capacity.
Wow. Thank you, Professor. That was very enlightening, because to see language as the engine that drives other faculties is fascinating. Because we also work with village children, and we see how this computational thing starts from language, because before going into addition, we have to teach them spelling, how to put together A, B and make a sound. or DA and make a sound. So that's something that is very interesting. The next thing that I would like you to talk about is linguistics as a line of study. What does one do in it? What is the science of linguistics? What does one do? What is your job? And to get into that domain, what does one need to do? And how this will change in the future? So this question is directed. The answer is going to be directed to students who are looking at, who would maybe look at linguistics as career choice.
Okay. Well, it's okay. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but please bear with me. You see, as we started and we understand, language intersects all domains of our lives. So definition of linguistics is also very simple. Anything that has to do with language falls in the domain of linguistics. Everything that is related to language is an object of a study for a linguist. And probably beginning from the ancient human race until today, linguistics, or the study of language as we call it, is one well-known, truly multidisciplinary activity. You can approach the study of language. You don't need any specific disciplinary training. You can be a mathematician, you can be a biologist. As at this point, as footnotes, I can tell you, biologists have made serious attempts to understand to what extent language is genetic. Because each individual has unique voice sample. Our voice sample is as unique as our DNA. So does it have something? Is it genetically encoded in humans? What does it have to do with our genes or other biology, and to what extent language is biological to us? There is a huge attempt in studying that field. So it's truly a multidisciplinary approach, multidisciplinary object, multidisciplinary domain of a study. So anybody doing anything from mathematics to philosophy to anything can approach the study of language. And as long as your object of study is one aspect of language, it falls in linguistics. If you look at it from the perspective of human curiosity, one of the well-known human curiosity is to know about others, is to know about things. And that happens only through language. Irrespective of someone, whether you speak that person's language or not, in one way or the other, extending all measures of your creativity, you try to communicate with that person. That's the extent of our curiosity to know about others. We know on one side that our languages are different. Our languages are going to be different. On the other side, we know that we have interest in learning about others. This necessitates the study of language. And like many other things, study of language, and to be more specific, our curiosity in learning others' language is also one of the most ancient domain of our learning. So the most powerful application of whatever we know about our language is applied in the field of language teaching. And it requires a lot of elaborations and explanations to tell you. But in short, one needs to see, if we know about the process, how we learn the language as a child, and how we use the language as in the beginning or as an adult, a combination of the two makes you, helps you, and enables you and to a great extent to attempt teaching any new language. Without understanding how it works, can work, but it's like trial and error method. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, doesn't work. But if we know how it works in the case of first language learning, then learning as an adult becomes much easier. And like I said, it requires a lot of elaborations. But so I'll leave that as one part of its application. And if we look at the modern time, though whatever we see, the domains of scientific inventions in which we see the applications of a study of language is not new. It started long time ago. But the scope for the application of the study of language in the field of technology and making it move beyond limits of human imagination can happen only through the nuanced study of how language works outside humans, that is how language works in the society, and how language works within human mind in terms of its parallel functioning of human mind. You see, I'll give you a very simple example. All the machines that are functioning parallelly today are functioning only on the basis of imagination that human mind could function parallel. That's one part. On the other side, as I talked about, the learning in the field of learning of language and anything in between. I remember one educational anthropologist. There is a very famous anthropological study. Her name is Shirley Heath. Mm-hmm. In a 1984 paper, she writes in one place that, and remember, it's approximately 40 years from now that she predicted that the advancements that is going to come out of a study of language in the field of linguistics is going to be like general knowledge for others to study, beginning from industrial sociology to computer science. This was the prediction in 1984, and even before that, a lot of people have spoken about it. So what she is basically saying is, look, if I understand, if I know 2 + 2 is 4, this doesn't make me a mathematician. If I know every action has equal or opposite reaction, that doesn't make me a physicist. Similarly, but we know about 2 and 2 is 4, and equal and opposite reactions will have some consequences. Likewise, the fundamentals of the study of language will become common knowledge to people. These are the applicational implications of the study of language, and the domain is unlimited. People only are, it is left to our imagination to what extent what we need to do with our understanding of language. I talked about a teacher, I talked about a scientist. I can tell you about a trained counselor, a psychologist. The more you know how to deal with language, you can engineer other humans. You can make humans do whatever you want them to do only through use of your language. Some people are naturally gifted towards that. Some people have to learn how to do those things. But engineering a machine, engineering our mind, and engineering human beings as such in society, all gets navigated through language.
Wonderful. So you're teaching at the IIT Madras, and what kind of students take linguistics as a subject? Because it's a technical campus, it's a campus for technology studies. So give us a picture of what kind of students come and what do they take linguistics? What are they looking for when they take linguistics?
Sure. See, I'll approach this question in slightly differently. I teach at IIT Madras. I teach courses in language and linguistics, and I'm part of a department which is called Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. That's how it is structured organizationally. But if you look at the study of language, it's a virtual department at IIT Madras and at many other institutions in the following sense. On this campus, I see computer scientists, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, biotechnologists, philosophers, mathematicians, and whatnot studying language. Even to the extent of people working in the field of management, trying to study organizational behavior or financial management, want to study human behavior through human language. So in that sense, it's a virtual department. Now, for the graduates, undergraduates of technology and engineering, linguistics or a course in linguistics is not directly inserted in their curriculum, but it becomes a part of their curriculum as one of their elective subjects, which is in a brilliant way designed in the early 60s when curriculum of engineering was designed. It was designed in such a way that I'm not familiar with that that logic, but one can only assume today that probably education of medicine or engineering remains incomplete if we don't understand about the society in which we are going to use our technology or anything else. Because after all these things are directed to human life. So we need to understand humans, human life, human society, and so on. So as part of that endeavor, it becomes one of the elective courses for undergraduates and graduates of engineering and technology. And when they study these things in detail, then they start looking at what they can do with this. And I can specifically tell you some examples that has happened in the past. There are a lot of people who have changed their career into a study of language after getting an undergraduate degree from an IIT or any engineering college in mechanical engineering, computer science, or electrical engineering. They have made their career in a study of language. And also several of them, for example, one of our students who graduated recently wanted to study, is a graduate of electrical engineering from IIT Madras, wanted to study the application of language in teaching dyslexic children. Is there a way one can design technology for instructional design, which will start evaluating what the child knows and give reinforced input to children at the level of his or her capability in terms of language. And this got converted into product, and this is working well with the assistive technology online or otherwise. And I don't know the details of what's happening as of now, but this all started with a study of simple discussions of language and the study of how its application works. So development of assistive technology for what we say quote unquote dyslexic children started with this thing. with a study. So the applicational value and how students see this starts later. It's not embedded in their curriculum right away in an engineering school campus.
Thank you, Professor. We understand that language is, as you were saying from the start of the interview, that language is more than what we understand of it. And certainly getting this in, having this knowledge along with the knowledge of the history of language would, add on to our understanding of language. So could you speak a little about a brief outline about the history of language, language itself, like overall, a big picture of this?
Yes. You see, we first of all, we don't know much about the history of language. Language in the sense, I'm not talking about a language, I'm talking about language in general.
Yeah.
That is language as machinery.
Yeah.
So, right from the very beginning of human evolution, humans would have felt the need of communication. And at every point, like we see the difference, the best example, the best way to look at history of language is to look at it in the reverse order. If we take example of Tamil or Hindi or English, the way Hindi, English or Tamil are spoken today, these languages were not spoken 100 years ago. Again, if you go back into the history, 200 years, things were different. Again, you go back in another 100 years, things were very different. Okay, that's not very surprising. And to some extent, to let's say 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, we can go back and reconstruct. We can have records of those things to look at how, and on the basis of that, we can also we can also look at evolution and structural changes and its functional uses and so on. But you see, reconstruction of how it was spoken in the beginning of human existence is not possible. Let me be very frank about it. And there are researchers who have spoken about it. Most of the study that you go through on this topic of history of language, or for that matter, evolution of humans through language, they tell you, you would have heard sentences like thousands of years ago, or they use words which gives you sense of a speculation. So whatever we can say about the history, I'm talking about not recent history, I'm talking about unknown past of its development, is speculative. One can only speculate what would have happened. There is no way to, if we know how old is human existence, there is no way, scientific way, to go back to the beginning, reconstructing language. That's one part. However, it's not fair to say we know nothing. If we look at the history of 500 years and its development and its changes, we can, that also hypothetically or to some extent in a scientific sense, we can say what would have happened in the past. However, one thing is certain, that humans' inquisitiveness and humans need to communicate with others. And humans' inbuilt capacity to develop communication system or to speak. You see, we know Darwin, who has studied human evolution. There is one very famous sentence from Darwin which helps us understand language. Darwin writes somewhere, I don't have exact quote of this, we see instinctive tendency to speak in the babbles of our children, which is completely opposite of the tendency to bake, brew, or write. We have instinctive tendency to speak that we can observe in our children, but we don't have instinctive tendency to bake, brew, or write. He's making a clear distinction between what is innate and what is not innate. There are certain capacities that we acquire at a later stage. We can learn to write at a later stage. We can learn to bake or cook or dance or do anything. But learning to, the ability to speak is instinctive, and it's evolutionary process which cannot be stopped. That's as natural as our existence. So that is certain, but everything else one needs to fill in between hypothetically, and we can only look at the evolutionary process in the recent human history. One can go all the way to 500 years, 1,000 years. Beyond that, it has to be speculative. I mean, how can we find scientific evidence to look into something that happened 1 million years ago, or maybe 2 million years ago? So there is no scientific evidence. And as we were discussing in the beginning, anything, see, language is, we are talking about various aspects of language. Allow me to add a point here. Language is not something that just defines our existence. Language is closely related to our identity. At times, it is way more powerful than other markers of our identity, like religion. Language can be a more powerful marker of identity than religion or anything else. In that sense, what happens with language is, language will stay as a tool of study, as an object of study, only to the extent the person studying language does not become emotional about it. And please look at the scientific method. Anything or about anything, when we become emotional, that does not remain scientific. And this is the entire beginning of objectivity, which is the foundation of scientific study and scientific investigation. So about language, I have my following thing that I say: language is an object of study to me, to the extent it remains scientific, after which it becomes emotional. It ceases to be a study of our object of study in a scientific manner.
That's very interesting, Professor. I wanted to, next, we could talk about the connectedness of language. You were talking about things like we have a natural tendency to speak. We don't have a natural tendency to bake, brew, or write, according to Darwin. And so we do this automatically, and life happens around us. Wars come, famines come, destructions come, and migration happens, and then languages evolve and move forward and take shape. Now, in this context, if you can talk about the connectedness of language, like, for example, there was a movie called Das Vidanya. Do you know of that movie? It's a Hindi movie, Das Vidanya. Actually, Das Vidanya is a Russian goodbye. In Russia, they say goodbye. It's Das Vidanya. And the movie was about a man dying and saying goodbye. So he had a bucket list. And this word is very interesting because even the Tamil word vidu or vidu is to leave. Vidanya. Vida is also in Hindi culture, where the daughter, when she gets married, she leaves the house. So we seem even the word camera and kamra. Camera is room and kamra is again room. And we see these connectedness. So could you please tell us about these connectedness? And when I asked you about history, what I wanted to know is if you can capture, say, a history of the last recent history where the movement happened and how language is spread and things like that.
You see, languages are genetically connected to some and not connected with others. In the history of its development, let's again go back hypothetically to the beginning of human existence. We know that long time ago, there were very few people, and human existence must have gone through a very cruel history. Multiple times people would have been eliminated, died, and all kinds of things would have happened in the history that we don't have time to go into. Similarly, the development of these things must have been very interesting, in the sense that if two people are responsible for entire human race, then definitely one set of medium of communication would be responsible for all languages that we have around us. So, like families separate from one another and become different units, I would like to take the same route. Similar thing would have happened with language. But broadly speaking, if we look at India, India speaks languages from, according to 1929 estimate of Charles Grierson, India had 1,672 languages. We are not going into the details and discussions of what is language and what is a dialect and not. We take everything as language, because and to the extent that you can use language and dialect, two words interchangeably, we are fine. But any understanding of language or dialect is definitely something otherwise and politically and socially loaded and motivated. So all those 1,670 languages, and there has been a recent attempt to estimate live languages in India. There is a resource called People's Linguistic Survey of India. It claims roughly 850 to 900 languages are live in India. And there is an estimate that India speaks 1/3 of the total languages of the whole world. So that way we can estimate that roughly 6,000 languages are spoken all over the world. But, not more than 100 languages are spoken by 90+% people of the world. The rest of the majority of languages are spoken by very small fraction, small minority of human population. That's a very unique coincidence. So if you count 100 languages of the world, you will cover 90% of the population of the world, which speaks those 100 languages. If we are talking about 6,000, then 5,900 languages are spoken by the remaining 10% population of the world. These are different matters of statistical analysis and who speaks what. Now, going back to so these languages are classified in 4 different genetically different language families. And as we know, they are Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, Tibeto-Burman, and Austroasiatic, which is also known as Mundan. So to give you a geographical understanding, languages beginning from Kashmiri in Kashmir to Marathi in Maharashtra and Odia in Odisha and Assamese in Assam and everything else in between are called Indo-Aryan languages. Languages spoken in the southern tip, anything south of Maharashtra or Odisha, they are called Dravidian languages. Languages spoken in the northeastern parts of India, other than Assam, Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, and so on. Those languages are called Tibeto-Burman languages. The reason why we have these names is because they have some genetic similarity with one another. And I'll just give you one example. So the idea that sometimes we hear people saying Sanskrit is the is the center of all the languages. That doesn't sound like scientifically viable position. Because you see, the arrival of Sanskrit in India is much later than the existence of languages like Tamil and Malayalam. And the contact between Sanskrit and Malayalam shows that retroflex sounds in Indian Dravidian languages are in abundance. And it is from Dravidian languages that retroflex sounds have gone into Sanskrit and to other Indo-Aryan languages. Okay. Now, Sanskrit is, genetically speaking, Indo-European language, which is similar to Latin and other Semitic languages. So, arrival of Sanskrit in India and look at the human history, and these are the things that one needs to discuss at longer debates. See, one language, if there are two languages in contact, which language will influence the other? A will influence B or B will influence A. This is not very hard to understand. The language of powerful people influence the language of not so powerful. Language of elites is always something that is copied by language of quote unquote whom we say non-elites. So look at Sanskrit and Malayalam. The existence of these two languages side by side must not have been troublesome, because if we take language of Sanskrit as language of elites, it would have influenced Malayalam, not that it will get influenced by Malayalam. And here we have evidence that Tamil and Malayalam have influenced Sanskrit so much so that in pre-Vedic Sanskrit, we don't find retroflex sounds. And availability of retroflex sounds comes to Sanskrit only after they get in contact with Dravidian languages. And that is the route through which retroflex sounds have gone to Indo-Aryan languages, and as a matter of consequence, to modern Indo-Aryan languages like Hindi. So, and historically also, we know that the Hindi that we speak in India today is not more than 200 years old. And the existence of other languages in India, namely Malayalam and Dravidi, and Malayalam and Tamil, goes to pre-Vedic period. So there is no comparison between these languages in terms of its existence. So I'm trying to underline genetic relationship and classification of languages. So in Hindi, Sanskrit is likely to be closely aligned with English than with Indian languages. So it cannot be the foundation of Indian languages as such. That's one part. Now, coming to the second part of your question, you see, the similarity between sounds. So okay, allow me to make one more point. Even though genetically different languages which are genetically different from one another, when they existed together in society, there has been influence back and forth. But they have not changed their characters, their defining characteristics. And I'll give you one more example of that. You have lived in multiple parts of different states and country, and you are interested in language. So I'm assuming that you understand. You will get the point that I am trying to make. Like take question words in English. All question words in English begin with W and H. What? Like what, where, when, and so on. With an exception of how, but W and H are there in that word as well, of course, in a different order. Same way, all Indo-Aryan languages like Hindi, Marathi, Punjabi, Kashmiri, question words in these languages begin with sound k, like kya, kaun, ka, and so on. But if you look at all Dravidian languages like Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, they start with a sound.
Yeah, why?
Enna.
Yeah,
Enge. I'm not talking about letters. I'm talking about sound. When you speak
correct.
that, the sound is a. Enna,
correct.
enge. In all these languages, and this cannot be a conscious social engineering, as a result of conscious social engineering. So I'm just taking one example to tell you what it means to be genetically related with one another. Tamil is genetically related to Malayalam and Kannada and Telugu and not to Hindi. That's what the meaning is. And not in any otherwise sense. Similarly, English has completely different genetic root because it's a verb medial language and so on. So given that and coexistence of languages together, we can have some similarities in sounds and their meaning. But technically speaking, that is purely coincidental. So mother of English sounds like matter of Latin, and matri of Sanskrit, and therefore ma or amma, it's purely coincidental.
Because the Tamil word for amma is Thai. We say Thai.
Lot of languages have other words.
Annai also is there. Annai.
Yeah. All lot of languages have other words. So, and I will give you another example, like why we call a pen is completely arbitrary. There is no connection between the word pen and the sounds that this word involves, like pa, a, na, with the object that it signifies. There is no connection between these two. This is what is called arbitrary. And please take it back to my original point where I started with. Language, there is a huge role of arbitrariness in language. But language by itself is not arbitrary. Language by itself is very powerful tool, very structurally organized system, but it has huge role of arbitrariness in it. So any correlation between different words is purely coincidental, and to the best possible extent, we can simply say speakers of these two languages would have coexisted together. Otherwise, there is absolutely no correlation between why that would happen.
That's very interesting.
I'll stop here.
That's very interesting, sir. The reason why I wanted you to talk about it is to get an expert view on it, because even common people like me, we understand that there is some connectedness with language among languages, and also the spread of languages. You know, you are in. Even though you're not a Tamilian, you are living in Tamil Nadu right now, and I'm sure you're aware of the resistance to Hindi in Tamil Nadu for many years. But while that political movement and those radical thoughts were going crazy, on the other hand, advertising and movies really brought Hindi to us through the back door. Like we had Hindi jingles, and we got exposed to Hindi. Now, the question that I want, it's not a question, it's just that I want you to talk about it, because I read your recent article in Frontline, where you talk about how Hindi can become pan-India, a pan-Indian language, but you have proposed a very novel strategy for it. People can read that article and get an idea of it. Now, the question that I want to ask you is, would your suggestion take longer for this to happen? Because currently, the idea that are going on is for people to take up Hindi consciously, even in schools, like in other states, like state of Tamil Nadu, to have Hindi as a medium of education. Now, well, that is on one side, people might say it's kind of forceful, and you have suggested a strategy that is different. So what do you think? Do you think honestly that which one would be faster, which one would be quicker if the goal is to have Hindi as a pan-Indian language?
Well, to be honest, I don't know which one, but I am confident about what I am talking about. And when I am talking about something in my recent paper or the article is based on my understanding of how language functions and how language works.
Yeah.
And it has very little to do with ancient or existing political contexts. So I'll elaborate that on to you in simple words. See, we are aware of the spread of language in a different way, in the sense that, take the example of Tamil or Malayalam or Telugu. Tamil is not spoken the same way all over Tamil Nadu. There are internal variations. So Tamil is one umbrella term for multiple varieties that are spoken in different parts of Tamil Nadu. Now the question is, Tamil of which place is called standard Tamil? That everybody should know. If you think about this at a micro level, you will understand this is a futile question. Because any discussion on standardization of language, from the perspective of speaking the language, it's not a viable thing. Because people born in Chennai, that is the northern tip of Tamil Nadu, will speak the language the way Tamil is spoken in Chennai. And people born in Tirunelveli or Kanyakumari will speak the Tamil the way it is spoken in Tirunelveli or Kanyakumari. And same applies to everywhere in between. And therefore, you can take the same thing. This is called studying language variation and varieties of language. So one way to understand is, what we want to say Tamil is one idea, one name, which has multiple manifestations, and they are spoken in different places of Tamil Nadu or anywhere else it is spoken. That's how language variation and its varieties are studied and perceived. Same applies to Malayalam, beginning from northern tip of Kerala, that is the borders between Karnataka and Kerala, Kasaragod, all the way to Trivandrum. There are different varieties of Malayalam that are spoken in Kerala. And so it's true for Telugu, Tamil, Odia, Hindi, and all other languages. And this is what I meant when I said in the beginning, it's not, languages are fluid. They are not probably countable entity. Because if you start counting, you will have to count 50 different Tamils, 50 different Malayalams, 50 different Kannadas, and thousands of Hindis. Now, so that's about a spread of language. Now, coming to the technical part of this contagious issue, see, the resistance of Hindi in Tamil Nadu is not unfounded. That is very logical. And for that, one needs to understand what Tamil means to people of Tamil Nadu. Tamil or Malayalam or Kannada or Telugu, these are, or for that matter, even Marathi, Bengali, Odia, as I have explained in my paper, these are not just languages. They are two sides of the same thing. They are names of their languages, and they are part of their culture. Tamil is the name of the culture of Tamil people as well. Same thing applies to Bengalis, Assamese, Kashmiris, Punjabis, Marathis, and so on. So here I'm not talking about the divide between Indo-Aryan and Dravidian. Now, we cannot expect somebody to strip themselves of their identity and wear another identity. Every time Hindi is being talked about, it appears to the speakers of these languages in general and Tamil speakers in particular that somebody is trying to impose Hindi on us in the sense that you have to leave your Tamil identity behind. This is the foundation of resistance of Tamils against Hindi. Now, if the other point that you made is it is making its way through magazines, movies, and other things. You see, I'll give you an example. If you lived in Chennai, you grew up in Chennai, and I'm sure you are familiar with the situation in Chennai. I have gone to, I usually like to eat in smaller places so that I can talk to people and I can understand how things work. Because if you're eating at a customized place which works the same way in New York or in Chennai, you don't understand anything. So I found that in most of the places, the canonical restaurants of Chennai, people who are working there are either Bangla speakers or Assamese speakers or Odia speakers.
It was not like that before, but it has. I said it was not like that before. It was not like that before. It is a recent trend.
Absolutely, and I'm picking up on that recent trend.
Yeah,
and which will answer our question.
Yes.
So a friend of mine who is accompanying with me makes a remark. He orders something and the person does not understand. He waits for that, and I realized the situation that this person doesn't understand Tamil. So when I explained him to what my friend was talking about in Hindi, that person brings, and he was only demanding a little bit more sambar. And this person, friend of mine, makes a very significant remark, which is not hilarious, but linguistically significant to me. That I could not imagine a day that I will have to order sambar in Hindi in Chennai. Now, look at it. Look at the development. The good financial condition of the state has moved people's economic condition upward. So their low-level job, quote unquote, has to be done by someone else. And therefore, influx of immigration has found its root in Chennai. And you get speakers of different languages working on in these places. And that's one route of entry of other languages, not just Hindi, many other languages in Chennai in particular. And I'm not speaking about the entire Tamil Nadu or anything. I'm only talking about Chennai. So if you walk on the streets and you interact with people, you will see significant change in demography, which is still dormant, but it's significant, at least in Chennai. Now, what does this tell us? It is a natural process. It's not when people of Chennai need other languages, they will take it or accept it. They can make other languages part of their functional domains as long as it doesn't threaten their identity. So the problem with Hindi is, and I can candidly speak about it, language is not government's business. Government must not interfere with language and people via their language. So if Hindi is left alone, like English, it will become medium of communication, lingua franca for everybody. And nobody has resistance in Hindi as a lingua franca. But Hindi as language interfering into my being, it will be seen as threatening entity. And therefore I say it is it will have its better acceptability when it is seen as nobody's language.
Actually,
and therefore I'm giving arguments in that
short article. Wonderful article.
Hindi is nobody's language.
Actually, one interesting thing, the thing that we are noticing is we don't see any fear or stress among people wherever we live around us. People, in fact, are coming to us asking, to learn Hindi. They want their kids to learn Hindi. Shopkeepers are coming to us to learn Hindi, because they are seeing wealth in a different form. They're seeing people coming here from other places. And there is an opening in people's mind, at least because people themselves want to improve their lives. And it's very clear that they are asking for it. And as you said, if that idea of resistance or force is kind of taken away, the language naturally does its work. Of course, with advertising and movies and music doing their part, it naturally does its job.
That's very much true, and that's the only way language functions. So languages do not threaten each other. Languages are not in a natural form. Languages are not threat to one another, and the whole world is evidence of that. If languages threaten one another, let us go back to my first point that I made to you. We won't be speaking these many languages.
Professor Rajesh Kumar, thank you so much for your time. I enjoy talking to you, and thank you for giving your time. I hope the viewers pick points of interest and would continue to explore language as something beyond just communication and be useful, and that the content would be useful to them. Thank you, Professor, for your time. We hope to have you again in future interviews to talk about language and society and thought, evolution of thought. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for making me talk about these things. And I I sincerely admire your effort in this area of understanding and making it available to people. And I look forward to talking to you about some other aspect of language some other day. Thank you so much.
My conversation with Professor Rajesh helped me appreciate the generative and computational capacity of language. It helped me become aware of the human mind's ability to fill in the gaps in language and understand even the unspoken, a naturally and abundantly available computational skill in each of us. It will be wonderful to know your thoughts on the interview. Thanks for being here. I will see you soon with another interesting mind demystifying another interesting topic. Until then, take care.